At the moment, the only hospital that's up and running is NASA. So that's one hospital for the entire population of over 2 million. It's not difficult to do the maths. It's not going to work.
Joining us on Centre Stage today is Dr. Victoria Rose, a British plastic surgeon who travelled to Gaza twice this year to provide life-saving medical care to Palestinians living through the genocide in Gaza. Plastic surgeons play a crucial role in reconstructive surgery for those wounded by the ongoing violence. She says she was the only plastic surgeon operating in one of the last remaining hospitals in the Gaza Strip. Dr. Victoria Rose, thank you for speaking to Al Jazeera and for taking the time to be on Centre Stage. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
When we spoke in September, upon your return from Gaza after you being there for the second time this year, you had said that you had never seen anything like this before. Since then, the genocide continues, the besiegement continues, particularly of the north of the Gaza Strip, little or no aid being allowed in, that's according to testimonies. Did you think that it would get any more worse than it was when you were there?
No, but every time I come back, it seems to get worse. So it's difficult to imagine where it's going to finish up. But I really didn't think that we could continue functioning with this little aid that was getting into us in August. We ran out of a hand soap almost as soon as I got there. So the solution that you use to sanitize your hands before you operate, we were using sort of a kitchen soap instead. And towards the end of my month, we ran out of betadine skin prep, which is what we paint the skin with to sterilize it before we operate. I mean, we had run out of a lot of sophisticated dressings and we were down to the basics, but there are stories of other hospitals running out of gowns, gloves, drapes, gauze that you use in operating procedures. So it's difficult to imagine if less aid gets in, how people can keep functioning. And I do worry about the stories of people operating without any of these supplies and without anaesthetic.
A spokesman for the Ministry of Health recently said that in the Kamal Adwan Hospital, which I'm sure you know of, which is in the north of the Gaza Strip, there is only one medic that's left on site right now. That hospital besieged by the Israeli forces recently. What does that practically mean? Give us a sense of what that actually means on the ground when you have one medic trying to accommodate and service hundreds of thousands of people who are besieged in the north.
It means that there's very little that he's going to be able to do. And you also need to know, when they say one medic, do they mean one surgeon, one physician?
In this case, it was one pediatrician.
Exactly. So that's going to be very difficult to deliver any of the major trauma care. Number one, on your own, and number two, qualified as a pediatrician. I can't imagine how hard it's been for him.
You said during your time there that you had done a huge amount of work on children.
Yeah.
A lot of them under the age of 16, including many under 6. What sort of injuries did you see, and what sort of work did you personally carry out during your time there?
So the injuries are all blast injuries, mainly. When a bomb goes off, it will weaponize whatever masonry or metal from a car or anything caught in the blast gets sort of whipped up and thrown at very high velocity. That would strike a child, penetrate the skin, and either break the bone underneath or go into the abdomen or the chest or deeper. So the bulk of what I was doing was removing bits of shrapnel, dirt, brick from kids' arms, legs, faces, chests, abdomens, and trying to excise the entire wound bed so that it was clean enough for closure. And if that meant that the hole was too big to close directly, then we would dress it and wait for it to be clean enough to either graft or flap or some other form of closure. So that was the bulk of what we were doing, and that was in conjunction with orthopedics who would try and fix the fracture at the same time. The rest of the work was burns. So obviously in a blast you get heat from burns. And then there's a whole tranche of injuries from people running away. So obviously a blast goes off, that will create a lot of running away. So we had a few children that had been hit by cars as they were running into the street or hit by carts.
Was there one particular case, if you can even say that, that really struck you, something that you had to deal with?
Yes, there is a 7-year-old boy who was in a blast, and in the blast, the house had collapsed on him, and his father had died next to him, and he'd seen his father die in the collapse of the building. They'd managed to get him out. When they pulled him out, one of his legs was sort of attached like a rag doll, and they brought him into NASA and amputated that, but there wasn't enough skin to close it, so they dressed it waiting for a plastic surgeon to come and graft it or put a flap on it or whatever. And he also had an injury on his back of his other leg. I think they had cleaned and debrided, but nobody had really documented the extent of the injury. And when I got there, he was just so underweight, and his right leg that had been amputated was just infected. And he was just apathetic. You couldn't have a conversation with him. He didn't want to look at me. He didn't want to speak to me. And he'd lost the will to sort of live. And that's quite hard to see that in somebody of that age. And when I took him to the operating theatre the first time and I inspected all his wounds, I realised that the good leg, the hole in the back of it, had gone right into the major nerve and severed the major nerve. So the leg that he had, he would have not much use of below the knee.
In the context of, as you were saying when we first started speaking, lack of supplies, lack of anesthetics, I mean, you must have had to make some really difficult decisions. How challenging is that?
It is really challenging, and when I look at it now, I can't believe some of the things that I did, but because it's coming at you so quickly, so much, you're just focused on the job and getting things done and making sure that the next patient is on the table and that whatever reconstruction you're doing is done. So you kind of don't really dwell on the actual bigger picture of it all. You just keep going. And I think both times that I've been there, I've been the only plastic surgeon in the facility. So there's a huge amount of work for me to do. And I've always been very aware that I needed to see as many patients as I could and get through as much as I could, because we would never know when the next sort of fully qualified plastics person would come in.
You went twice, once in March and then once in August. Was there a difference between both times for you?
There was a huge difference in the way in which we travelled in. So when we travelled in March, we flew into Cairo and we joined the United Nations convoy in Cairo. And we had hired a minibus ourselves as a charity. We got that across the border. I got picked up and dropped off at the hospital, and it seemed very sort of functional. That route in was great.
And this was, of course, before the closure of the Rafah border crossing.
And then after the closure, the route in was through Amman. So we flew to Amman, and there is no UN convoy. There's just a bus, and there's only 25 of you on the bus, and you're only allowed to take one bag. So the kit that I took was minimal. And there's all these stories, or I don't know whether it's scare stories, that if you take more than one phone, more than one laptop, any medical equipment, your bag will be confiscated. You could jeopardise the entire bus load of mission. I took a small tray of instruments and my operating glasses and a few bits of disposable equipment that I knew NASA wouldn't have. But it was a much harder trip. And in the March, it was full of, people running around, shouting at us. And then when I travelled in August, it was like driving into a moonscape. And it was just destroyed building after destroyed building. You didn't see any semblance of a shop or a house or a mosque or anything until you were about 10 minutes into the drive. Mm-hmm. And I didn't see any life for a good 10 minutes.
We know now the WHO, the World Health Organization, said recently that Israel has banned at least 6 medical NGOs from entering Gaza. Is humanitarian assistance being used as a political weapon, do you think?
I think it's been done in a very sort of subtle way up until now, and now it's very blatant.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that a lot of the rules and regulations that came in after Rafah closed, and it's been a gradual sort of you can't take any equipment with you. You can't go in unless you go in for 28 days. You can't go in if you have any Palestinian heritage. And it's just mounting and mounting. And now to actually turn around and say that those NGOs aren't allowed to go in, it's very obvious what's happening.
How would you describe the state of healthcare and hospitals right now in Gaza more than 1 year into this genocide?
It's non-existent. It's non-existent. I mean, there's nothing there. There's only one hospital at the moment that's functioning fully. We keep sort of saying that there's 36 hospitals in Gaza, and that's before the war, and that 36 included 2 eye hospitals, 2 physiotherapy departments, and some primary healthcare centres that have capabilities to do minor procedures were included in that 36. But there were only ever 4 hospitals that were capable of managing mass trauma like we're seeing at the moment. And one of them was destroyed in the November, and that's Shifa. The other 2 are the European Gaza and Nasser, and they've both had evacuation orders, so neither of them have been fully functioning through the war. And Al-Aqsa had its first evacuation order in the September when we were leaving. So at the moment, the only hospital that's up and running is Nasser. So that's one hospital for the entire population of over 2 million. It's not difficult to do the maths. It's not going to work.
Back in February, the UN Human Rights Office said that there appeared to be, quote, a pattern of attacks by Israeli forces striking essential life-saving civilian infrastructure in Gaza, especially hospitals. Do you believe that Israel has made hospitals a key target of its military campaign?
I suppose I'm going very much on what people have told me has happened, but it would appear that there have been direct targeting of hospitals. It seems like there is a pattern to ensure that there is no sort of large-scale facility running.
As a doctor, how do you make sense of these repeated violations? I mean, hospitals are supposed to be protected under international law, yet, as you're saying, and as many people on the ground say, they have been repeatedly targeted by Israel in Gaza.
It's very difficult to understand how it's still going on. I mean, the justification for it is very unbelievable. Why they needed to evacuate Nasser particularly is it makes no sense. To ensure that your fighting is in the zone that a large hospital is situated in is also quite unfathomable.
A UN official has told Al Jazeera that there has never been another conflict where healthcare workers have come under attack like they have been in Gaza, describing what Israel is inflicting upon the Strip as medicide. That's a new term that they're using for the incredible destruction of not only the healthcare system, but of course the attacks against healthcare workers. As a healthcare worker yourself, I mean, do you worry that this sets a precedent, what we're seeing when it comes to Palestinian medical staff on the ground in Gaza, the attacks against them, that this will set a precedent for healthcare workers, and that there's practically impunity for anyone that violates healthcare workers in this way?
I cannot understand how the world stands by and watches it happen. It's incredible that it's now moved into Lebanon, and I'm waiting to see which hospitals get hit there.
Is the medical community doing enough to speak out for colleagues on the ground in Gaza and now in Lebanon, or has the medical community failed?
I think we have done a lot. I think a lot of the reporting, certainly on social media, has been by the medics. I don't think there's a single medic that has come out and not done an interview or done a piece on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. There are lots out there. The doctors that came back to the United States in March all wrote to the president. When we came back from our first trip in April, we wrote to Keir Starmer and the Foreign Secretary. I think we have put as much pressure as we can, but we're not being listened to. That's the problem.
Did you get a response to what you wrote?
We had a letter from the Minister for the Middle East, but it didn't address any of the concerns that we directly had regarding humanitarian aid and evacuation of patients. And we have now written back requesting a face-to-face meeting to discuss this further and are waiting for the response of that.
Does it feel frustrating to you seeing that you've written these letters, you're asking for a meeting, yet at the same time you see the genocide continuing on the ground and not any significant change happening when it comes to the UK's policy of supporting Israel blindly and sending weapons to Israel? And these weapons are the ones that are killing the children that you've had to operate on.
It's hugely frustrating. I can't tell you how frustrating it is that nothing that we've said has actually caused any change. But I think we just have to keep going. I'm 100% convinced that the majority of the UK believe that the war should stop immediately.
What is the main message that you'd like to get out there from your time in Gaza?
I think it's the fact that this is a completely different war to anything that we've seen before, and that the restriction on the reporting has made it very difficult for this to stay in the public eye.
Why did you choose to go to Gaza? Not just once, but twice, in fact. And will you be going back?
I will be going back. It's a difficult decision to make because my family are obviously not keen for me to go back. Once you go and you know how much work there is to do and how important it is that you're there, even just to be next to your Palestinian colleagues, to keep them going, it's very difficult not to go back. And I think most people that have been have now gone back and will go back. Before the war started, I worked for a charity called Ideals, and two of the orthopedic surgeons that worked with Ideals work in my hospital, and they were trying to deliver the same trauma care in Gaza that we deliver in my London teaching hospital. And I knew that they couldn't really do that without a plastic surgeon that does a lot of major trauma. And so I said, look, I'll come and give you a hand. And then once I got out there, it became very clear to me that they needed a plastic surgeon in Gaza. There isn't a plastic surgery training program in Gaza. Very luckily, I met a Palestinian surgeon who was interested in learning major reconstruction. He'd been training in Qatar and he was near the end of his training. He came to Gaza to meet me on my last trip in 2020 and said, can I come to the UK and train with you? And that was Ahmed Mokhalalati. And he came to London and was with me from 2021 to 2023. And you invest a lot of time in training someone and you become very close to them. And he said from the start when he came that he wanted to go back to Gaza and that everything that we taught him would make a huge difference to the population of Gaza. And I remember at the time thinking how many trainees say that they want to change people's lives. And, you know, when they come into plastic surgery, it's a story that you hear a lot. And then he went back in February and started sending me photographs of people's lives that he was changing. And he was the only person that could do the operations he was doing. And so when he started sending me pictures in the October of children caught in this conflict, there was no doubt in my mind that I had to go and help him.
Thank you so much, Dr. Victoria Rose. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.